Abraham, Elohim, judicial, Elohim, your uncle.
Shalom again, and welcome to another exciting edition of Torah Watchman Show, LLC. Yes, none other than your humble, simple, Hardy Jewish servant, Reb Ya'ara ben-Emmett. Yes, hope everyone is getting ready to have a thrill ride of their lives. What am I talking about? In a few hours, and I only have a little time to do this because I've been running short all week long. Because Holy Shabbos is just a few hours away. Shabbat should be the most joyous, happy, thrill ride of a Jew's life. It's a rare opportunity to get those wrong paths straightened and rightened. It's a unique opportunity, as some people say, to get a second nefesh. Yes, to hit the reset button. And ascend your nefesh to higher levels of glory than ever before. I wish everyone has a successful Shabbat this week, a holy Sabbath Kodesh. I hope you have time for a friend to come to your dinner table. You're supposed to have a feast. You're supposed to save up all your shekels for Thursday leading up to Friday, and which you have all the food and preparations ready. You're supposed to be eating things during Shabbat you not normally eat on the mundane days. I hope that you also have an open door policy for the stranger. Listen, not because it pleases you, not because it makes you look good in front of your peers, because it brings glory to Elohim. It is his opinion that you should be welcoming your home, your synagogue of your home, of your establishment, your family dwelling, just like Abraham. Abraham opened all four corners of his tent to everyone in need. He really did. That's how he encountered the angels of the Lord. Yes. Anyway, this Torah Watchman show is about Parashat Ki Teitzei. Ki Teitzei. This is Davarim. We're continuing in the final book of Moshe, the last 6 weeks of his life, many people speculate. Chapter 21, verse 10, through chapter 25, verse 19. Incidentally, the Parashat Ki Teitzei means when you go out. Okay? And it's very germane to what I just told you. When you go out, what are you going to watch for? When you cross the road, are you going to cross the road when the light is red and you see a big flashing red hand there, as in most countries in the world? Or are you going to wait until you see a person walking on the symbology across the path? So be safe. When you go out, what are you going to do? How are you going to present yourself? Do you care anything about your reputation? But more importantly, do you care about the reputation of Elohim? Why? Because he created us in that spark of glory in his precious and beautiful and sweet and gorgeous image, right? Let's get started. I have a synopsis here, and I'm going to have a different way because we're short on time, but not short on quality, ever. Not with ben-Emmett here. 74 of the Torah's 613 commandments, or known as the mitzvot, good deeds, are found in this Parashah, Ki Teitzei. So what does that tell you? If you are a Baal Teshuva Jew, or if you're a Jew that was not raised properly in Torah study, or you're just ignorant of your Old Testament, if you want to know where all the beautiful, sweet things are as far as what God expects of you, both positive and negative commandments, and yes, they're not all positive. Some of them are negative, like the 252nd negative commandment that most rabbinites ignore about accepting a stranger, a sojourner in your land for Jewish conversion. Not going there. But Davarim is like a Mishnah Torah, like the Ramban wrote, and it summarizes the previous 3 books of Moshe. Some of these laws are how to treat a beautiful captive, okay? Yeah, we're talking about military men here, okay? In the Navy, unfortunately, in the U.S., they said there's a girl at every port, and there's a lot of nefarious behavior, a lot of things that you should not do in the military because you're around the world and there are many vulnerable people. And if you just conquered someone's land and crossed their territory and destroyed their military prowess and you won over that victory, you clean up the spoils, you take the gold, the silver, all the cattle and everything else, and what you find there also that is not part of the military regiment you defeated are the most vulnerable women, namely virgins, young girls, and children, and maybe the elderly as well. So what happens when there's special laws and rules for even those foreigners that are not Jewish, that are virgins, they're innocent before the beautiful eyes of Elohim, and as a Jew, you have a duty, a mandate, and responsibility on how to behave yourself when it's convenient, and most importantly, when it's not convenient. Also, the incredible inheritance of the firstborn. We've heard about this ad nauseum throughout the Torah with our previous parashats, beginning in Goshen, Egypt, the firstborn of the Jews there that the Pharaoh tried to exterminate. And they survived, majority of them did survive, to actually some of them that did not go the route of the golden calf actually became considered as candidates for the priesthood. Even to this day, if a young couple, a Jewish couple gets married and they have a son as the first child, that son is considered a possession of Elohim as the firstborn. Many people adopt a Nazarite tradition with that as well. Also, the wayward and rebellious son. Okay? Without going into a lot of detail about it, what I'm talking about is juvenile delinquents, essentially. In America, we have what we call reform school, military school. Parents put their children in the most expensive private schools money can buy, and they hope in those schools, those teachers will instruct them on the right path, and they as authority figures and discipline them. But if you're unwilling to discipline your children at home, don't expect other people, and especially teachers, to discipline your children for you. But what happens when your son or daughter is not a child anymore, and they're past the point of accountability, past 12 and 13 respectively, and they're running the roads, drinking and carousing, getting women pregnant, thievery, robbery, assaults, and all kinds of things. And they bear your surname, and they represent your family, and they're an embarrassment to your whole reputation. A Jew does not care too much about how they die or what happens after they die. We care more about how we live. And that's why it's a very important mitzvah about this as well. Also, burial and dignity of the dead, these are just common sense things. Even 3,500 years ago, at least the Jewish people were civilized enough to know, even a Kohen priest, if a Kohen priest walks down the road, or a Levitical priest, or someone who observes 100% of all the cleanliness rules because of their priestly duties, because of their work in the temple, in the Mishkan, and they encounter a body, a corpse, hanging from a tree. Someone had strung them up and hung them, and they died. What does that priest do? If that priest interacts with that corpse, they're unclean ceremonially for at least 7 days. And they're isolated from the temple work. And they're isolated from mainstream tribal Israel for that time of quarantine. What that Kohen priest does, unlike this so-called stupid Good Samaritan story that's molested in the Christian's New Testament, they have to stop what they're doing. They have to cut down the corpse. They have to dig a hole, a plot, and bury that body. It's not just because of minimizing issues with plagues and disease and all that nature, but it's also about doing the right moral thing. And it does not necessarily say this person is a Jew for another Jew to treat their body with dignity. Why? Because our vehicles of our vessels were created from rough clay and created by the divine creator, in which he breathed his nefesh within us, whether we are an ancestor of Japheth, Ham, or Shem. Regardless. Okay? Another nice story here, returning a lost object that's found. If you there's laws of modification. If you found something and it's not yours and you don't know who owns it, something. A lot of times things drop out of people's pockets, right, or backpacks or whatever. And sometimes the owner is looking for that. And what happens when you find that and you say finders, weepers, losers, that saying right there is that tough luck, Charlie. I found it and you didn't, so weep. I found your precious ring that you lost. It's like, this is piracy. It really is. Especially if you know who owns that object, that precious object. And the law of modification, if you bring it to your household and own it and rebrand it as yourselves, as your personal possession, and you break it, and then someone reports to the chief priest or someone, hey, I lost this item, etc., etc. And then they track it down to your place because word of mouth gets around that you had something identical to this. And then they found out you heavily modified it. They may not want it anymore, but they also may require payment for that loss, that monetary loss, okay? Sending away a mother bird before taking her young chicks, or namely eggs. When you're starving, you're hungry, and especially when you're traveling, you look for anything you can for nourishment, right? Especially if you're Jew and it's kosher. I've said this over and over again. Excuse me, Elohim cares about animals so much. He cares about all animals. He cares about all living things. He really does. He does not want any animal to suffer unduly. Even though we are put on this planet, on the earth, to be custodians of these animals. These animals would not be on the earth if it was needful for us to be on the earth. And they're here as a support system for us. That's why in the Great Flood, all these animals died because there were no humans there to manage them. But as far as the story here, and it's based on some truth, and it's also stories in the Talmud and other things like that. You're walking down the road, you see a nest, and it's full of eggs. and you're hungry and you haven't eaten, in 2 days, you are allowed to grab and steal those eggs for yourself if you don't see a bird, the mother bird there. You're not allowed to scare away that bird. And you're not allowed to take those live chicks and fry them and put teriyaki sauce on them and barbecue and whatever if that mother bird is there. Okay? Also, imported mitzvot here about the duty to erect a safety fence around your property. For instance, some people, especially with stone houses and things of that nature, you have what they call an ease around the perimeter of the top of the roof, and sometimes those bricks, they break off, or the mortar or cement or something breaks apart, and it could fall inadvertently and kill someone or kill their goat, sheep, or whatever. And you're required to build a hedge around the top of that ease, per se, to keep debris and other things. You may have all kinds of things that's storing on top of the roof of your house. And some countries, you have big barrels to collect rainwater. So you have a responsibility to build fences around your property and demark that real estate as yours, and where your property begins and ends with your neighbor. And as it said before, that fences make great neighbors. It also helps minimize fights and disputes, right? These fences are very important too to keep a ox or a bull, something with horns like that, very dangerous. And if you know that your fence is in disrepair and you just procrastinate and put it off, and that animal gets out, it could gore someone, could kill someone. So you're responsible for this. And I wanted to say this briefly, without going down a rabbit hole. Noahides used this Hebrew word for fences to just really go out there and create all kinds of hundreds and hundreds of rules about putting fences around your morality, putting fences around your life, keeping you from going to places where you could be seduced, namely men that have problems, married men have problems with pretty women. I've already mentioned this before about a soldier finds a pretty virgin and he just have to have this person. I want this person to be my wife. I want to have a baby with this person. Or, unfortunately they may rape that person. But, back to the fences and Noahides, that was his justification for creating additional laws outside of the Torah, outside of 613 mitzvot, because he said human beings need fences and controls and protocols to contain their passions and their behavior. Like Elohim forgot to put something in the 5 books of the Torah, or forgot to relay something to Moshe, or forgot to relay something to thousands of other prophets across generations of time. Okay? A word, you pronounce it kilayim, as forbidden plant, and animal hybrids. It's absolutely forbidden, even though agriculture does this all the time throughout the world. It's absolutely forbidden to diversify seeds of different species of plants and combine them in the same row and encourage cross-pollination, especially genetic hybrids. We are not encouraged to play God with organisms and things of this nature. You're not even allowed to have 2 dissimilar animals plowing your garden in the same adjacent rows or areas either. And it also goes to clothes too. Back in ancient times, it was popular to have wool and other things like this from animals, and then something from a plant product as well. And it's not kosher to wear that kind of thing. It's about purity, it's about cleanliness, it's about being deliberate and being very specific about everything. And listen, this is about fences again, but the type of fences I'm talking about is those that were already discussed at nauseum throughout the 613 mitzvot, the 5 books of Moshe, of the law, the original Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Also recounted are the judicial procedures and penalties for adultery. Yeah, you hear me. That deadly sin there. For rape and seduction of an unmarried girl, a virgin. And I already mentioned this before about military. Men do what men do, unfortunately. They're away from the priest, they're away from the rabbi, they're away from their wife. And sometimes when people go in the military, they're required to give their wife an order of divorce because they don't intend to coming back home. They could be killed. So there's a lot of issues with this. When Israel conquered Canaan and defeated all the Canaanite tribes, when they conquered Jericho and conquered other cities under Joshua's leadership, what are you going to do with the populace that were not military fighters? I said, you have to have controls and fences around human relationships like that, because most people take the least path of resistance, right? And that can lead into all kinds of trouble. The following cannot marry a person of Jewish lineage, a mamzer, or someone born from adulterous or incestuous relationship, a male or of Moabite or Ammonite descent, a first and second generation of Edomite or Egyptian. This is impactful for the story of Karaite Jews that predominantly were in Egypt and eventually were allowed to aliyah into Eretz Israel in the 1960s and 70s. There were curses upon certain races of people, certain nations of people by Elohim. And for the Moabites were absolutely prohibited to interact with the Jewish people. But this curse was upon Moabite men. So a Moabite man was forbidden to marry a Jewish girl, a Jewish woman, okay? But something that Elohim revealed in the life of the great-grandmother of King David, Ruth, a Moabite, she eventually married Boaz, and a Jewish man, I think of some royalty and well-renowned and that kind of thing. So that compromise was allowed for that. You had to wait several generations from the departure of Goshen, Egypt, before Jews were allowed to interact with Egyptians. And this is something I want to bring to note here, and something I just noticed. During the time of Moshe, all the way up to, I would say, before they exiled the Jews by King Nebuchadnezzar II in Babylonia, all the lineage, all the Jewish ancestry, and the way land, especially for men, was handed down from father and son, was through paternal lines, not the mother. The mother could be Egyptian. The mother could be a Moabite. The mother could be of some other race, like I said before, Ammonite descent. Because when you conquered some of these nations, I don't know how many Canaanite women survived these battles, but some of them were used as concubines, as surrogate mothers, essentially. So back to the first century ruling by rabbinate, saying you're only Jewish if you're born from a Jewish mother, is completely in error and wrong, and it's an abomination for still keeping that statute going for 2,000 years, because it destroys Jewish lives. It almost destroyed the Karaite people because of this, because rabbinate insisted that the Karaites had Jewish mothers to identify as being truly Jewish. These are made-up laws by the rabbinate. I'm not going to go in any more detail because I've talked about this before. Okay? Our parashah also includes laws governing the purity of military camp. I hit on this point in the very beginning. The prohibition against turning in an escaped slave, those conditions there. The duty to pay a worker on time. We have, like in Maryland, we have labor laws, and most states in the United States have specific labor laws about keeping employers from abusing their employees, like exempt employees that work salary. You get paid for 80 hours of work, but you're required to work 100 hours in that 2 weeks period. It's kind of problematic, but this does happen. It happens to me. But anyway, and to allow anyone working with you, man or an animal, to eat on the job. Yes. I bring my lunches to work, and I never leave work to go to a restaurant. I use up that hour when I work because I usually just snack and just eat maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then I'll go back to the lab and finish my work that way. So, the Torah talked about this, and it's ingenious. I mean, Elohim thinks about everything, right? The prohibition against charging interest on a loan, this is from Jew to Jew. It's okay to do this for a Jew to charge interest on a loan to a non-Jewish person. The laws of divorce, from which also derive many of the laws of marriages and types of marriages. The penalty of 39 lashes for transgression of Torah prohibition, and procedures for Yabum, or the Levirate marriage. In other words, if a Levite priest passed away and made his wife a widower, the widower, the brother of that Levite priest, under this Levitical ruling here, is required to marry the dead brother's wife. Okay? That is a tradition with that. Also, there's something known as halatzah, removing of the shoe. In other words, when a woman discards literally her husband as I'm done with this man, leave this house and don't let the door hit you on the way back. Literally taking off your shoe and throwing it in the direction of the person. This is a good segue that I'm going to read a commentary here, and to keep this Parashat abbreviated. But one last point: the curse of the Amalekites, who went out of their way to attack vulnerable, non-combat, non-armed Jews who had recently escaped Egypt and was trying to meander their way through the wilderness of Sinai. Amalekites went out of their way to attack the Jewish people, not just once, but many times. So the last part of this parashat is to remember the curse of the Amalekite, and these were equivalent to any groups of anti-Semites like Hezbollah, like the Palestinians, the PLO, the mullahs in Iran, all those people that hate the Jewish people and do everything they can and just live every day to exterminate the Jewish people. I mean, literally the mullahs on their weapons, or ICBMs, have in Hebrew about killing Jews and destroying the nation of Israel. Okay, I found this excellent documentary here. This is Davarim. You can want to follow along with me, chapter 22, verses 13 to 21, briefly. The meaning of these verses. And this is very impactful too for Karate Judaism, and some of my previous indictments against rabbinites, aka Orthodox rabbis and orthodoxy in general. Verses 13 to 20 contain cases that concern marriage relationships. Marriage relationships can be extremely complex, and always they're different based on the different varying range of personalities and ages of the group. Is there children involved and things of that nature? They describe various situations or use cases in which marriage is involved. These cases are best understood with the backdrop of being a frequent comparison of the Lord's covenant with Israel and marriage relationship. Repetitively, you can read in the prophets, Yeshayahu, Ezekiel, and others, how Elohim viewed Israel as his daughter, as someone who was of disdain, who was thrown off to the curb and thrown in the alley to die, and he redeemed her, he took her, cleaned her up, made her holy and sacred again, dressed her in fine linen, the most beautiful of all clothes, put a gold ring on her, and made her his bride. But these comparisons here in something, I promise you, I've been in Orthodoxy for nearly a decade, and I've recently left. I've made these declarations. I will never go back there. I'm marching forward in Judaism. But Jewish men routinely denigrate women. They treat them as baby factories. They cover up their bodies like an Orthodox Muslim puts a burqa on his wife in some cases. If you're married, you're required to wear a wig. And you're also required to cover your head incessantly. And some in ultra-Orthodoxy even wear a head covering around their husband in the home because of the slight chance a strange man may come to the door and they have to cover their hair. This is not in the Torah, by the way. But what is in the Torah is building fences, per se, around nefarious men that do anything they can after going to the huppah and making those vows between Elohim and the laws of Moshe and everything else, and saying all mine, and talking about having children and everything else, the Tanaim, the Ketubah, all of this, leading up to matrimony, but only to say is, like the issue with Leah was not quite so beautiful as Rachel, with Yaakov. There were many cases in Israel during the time of Moshe because these laws came into effect because they had to be mitigated, where men would discard their wives, young women, young girls essentially, were virgins, for any reason they want to, to the point of saying these women were not virgins in the first place, that she lied to me, she'd been sleeping around, her father lied to me too, because she was staying with him. Evidently, he allowed her to slip through the window. This is one of the biggest excuses for men and rationale to go to Moshe or the judges or the chiefs of Israel to demand a divorce from their wives. And then they went to the nth degree of bearing false witnesses against their wives and destroying their reputation, which is equal to murder. Now you think all men, Jewish men, are so righteous, so humble, treat their wives like queens, and some of them do. I treat my wife like a queen because I want to live a long life, right? But men so often do not emotionally connect to their wives. They use them as a baby factory. They use them to work as indentured servants around the house, the cooking and cleaning and raising the kids with very little help for the men. And the father, the husband or whatever, is in yeshiva and studying Torah, which is all nice, while allowing the wife to work like a slave at home day and night, while he does essentially what he wants to. But then there comes a time of inconvenience, they never consummated the marriage. And the husband said, I don't want to consummate the marriage with this woman, even though you've been so-called married, per se, for weeks, if not months, because you accuse her of adultery and accuse her of sleeping around on you before she met you. There's nothing that makes Elohim more angry about the daughters of Zion than this kind of situation. That's why I wanted to bring it out to you. It's very impactful because there's many things. And Davarim, like I said, 70% or something, all the mitzvot is in there. And this is not talked about near enough. It really, really isn't. It's not talked about near enough. Why? Because it impugns the so-called righteous reputations of rabbis and Jewish men. I'm not going to go into again and talk about, putting hiding women on balconies, putting women behind walls, and special ceremonies, when you see all these almost like a NFL football game at the Coliseum, you see all these Haredi Jews jumping and dancing, and that's all beautiful and everything else. One single woman interacting in those celebrations. Why? Because I've even heard testimonies from some of these Orthodox women, and I'll say this and I'll shut up. They are keeping their husbands from sinning. And they're keeping other men from sinning too. Is that amazing? Okay, let's round this up in this end. Ki Teitzei Here's some of the highlight points, okay? In case someone comes and gives you an open book test on this, right? Returning lost objects. When we find something that somebody has lost, is there any way we can figure out who it belonged to? We should return it to the owner. It's a big mitzvah to return a $100 bill that don't belong to you and you didn't earn it. If you spend a little detective work, a little Sherlock Holmes work, and find it and return it, right? Though I understand the law of modification, but we're encouraged to be honest and upright, right? In our business transactions, both formal and personal. Okay, burying the dead. I already mentioned this before. There's really no exceptions about that, unless the corpse is so deteriorated that it's gone to the earth and that kind of thing. But in a time of military battles and conflict, there are dead bodies everywhere, and it creates a plague and disease, that kind of thing too. And there was a continuing issue of uncleanness and tribal Israel, and the red heifer and all of this, when people were accidentally walking on parts and members of corpses that have been long past dead. Okay, protecting the mom of a female bird, eggs in a situation like that. How Elohim cares about every sparrow, every songbird, every animal in the field. They have a purpose, they have a need, other than just serving our selfish needs. We mentioned about fencing again. Anyone who builds a new house has to make a fence for the roof. You hear about walled cities and unwalled cities. That's in the same genre of context there. So essentially to keep people from hurting themselves and then getting to a fist fight or over property damage. Okay. No mixing of dissimilar objects and ingredients. We must be careful not to create a kilayim, which is a special chemical aggregate of things that are hybrid in scope and nature. We don't mix two different species. We don't grow two different types of seeds. Take the flowering plant of jalapenos in one row in your garden, and you don't supposed to plant tomatoes in that same row, and because sometimes they do cross-pollinate. Okay, the honeybees or butterflies or whatever that spreads nectar and pollen, they could instantly go from plant to plant, and it's not pure. Okay, this is what Elohim is trying to teach us: pure in mind, pure in voice and speech, all the windows of your nefesh. Let your words and deeds be in alignment with truth. Okay. Tzizit, didn't cover this, but tzizit is the time is anytime we wear a four-cornered garment, we have to attach strings. Today we don't wear four-cornered garments anymore. We're just shirts that just pull down or stick in our pants, that kind of thing. We have tzizit. And I'll show you in just a moment. This is the chain kind of format of Kardi tzizit, which is different than rabbinates. Very proud of this talent, and I decommissioned my other one. I had an Ashkenazi one that I once loved. And sometimes we don't love the things we used to love in the past because of truth, right? Well, tzizit is very important, even though tzizit is not actually in the Torah per se. It essentially means braided or chain cords of string, and the very important thing, there's always one blue string at least that goes through the other cords that are white. And why is that? You have white of purity, that kind of thing, blue to think about the sky, Shamaim, heaven, and God and everything else. Well, rabbinates do not believe in having blue in their tzizit. They're always white all the time, because of Talmudic interpretation during the time, 2,000 years ago, in the Sanhedrin and everything else, because that blue color supposedly at that time by the Romans was overfished, a sea urchin that had blue blood within it that's used for pigment and staining. And it doesn't exist anymore. And since rabbis say we don't know the exact color of that blue cord anymore, blue is a clue, yeah, blue's clue. We want to opt on the side of caution and have just white cords. Okay, that's a choice. But, the Torah says very clearly what you shall do and what you should not do. And these are choices that rabbinists make all the time by creating other laws and 50 shades of gray and compromises. And their Shulchan Aruch and the reverse engineering of the previous Sanhedrin rules to create their own halakha, essentially. Eating on the job should be encouraged. You should eat anywhere you need to. There's a greatest, probably one of the greatest mitzvot is keeping a Jew alive. We've lost so much, right? You need to eat, you need to drink, and don't overwork your employees to the point where they don't have time to eat. Okay. Again, a lesson from Miriam. If someone says something bad about another Jew, he is punished with tazarat. Tazarat is a leprosy-like disease. It's not leprosy, but it's something similar. White spotting and lesions on your body. Rabbinists love to bring up the blessed and righteous sister, the water giver of Aaron and Moshe, Miriam, because she said something wrong and inaccurate about Moshe's relationship with his wife. She was not punished or cursed by Elohim for gossiping per se. She was cursed by saying things she knew were not true because out of fit of rage or anger. Okay, like you married that Cushite woman, and now she's lonely for you, and I'm responsible for sisterhood. I have to answer to these women, and people are talking about this. The thing is, it went too far and was not mitigated. Aaron knew that was happening, like the golden calf. He knew it was happening, didn't do anything about it. And God wanted to make an example about that. And this started the whole idea of talking about Tazarat, blessing and curses. In tribal Israel, at least, if you had Tazarat, you did something wrong. Okay? If you didn't have seasonal rains for your crops and they wither up and dry, you did something wrong. It's a sin. At least during that time, because that land was protected by Elohim's interaction by his nefesh, Mishkan worship, etc., etc. Jews are reminded to always observe special rules of human relationship to keep you from focusing on too much negativity and spreading malicious rumors and everything else. As a Baltic Jew, I've had so many so-called righteous rabbis spread malicious rumors about me, but like telling other people I am not truly Jewish when I know I'm Jewish, scientifically Jewish too, because I've had Jewish tests, chromosome tests to prove that I'm ethnically Jewish, primarily on my father and secondarily on my mother too. But this started the whole diatribe of Lashon Hara, where you cannot say anything negative about a rabbi at all, even though they're an immoral smuck. I hate to use the word, but people are human, just like everyone else. Any Jew can sin. Any Jew can make mistakes. Any Jew can cheat on his wife or abuse his wife, abuse his children. It doesn't matter if you're a rabbi or not. But there is zero accountability of rabbinate because of the golden rule of Lashon Hara, never say anything negative about another rabbi, even though it's true, even though you have witnesses, unlike Miriam, who knew what she was saying was not proven to be correct. She was not absolutely sure what she was accusing Moshe of before she went out and made an accusation, not just privately from brother and sister, but the entire house of Israel. And that's why she was cursed and punished. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. It's not because she was going around playing, spreading malicious gossip, and imputing everyone's reputation. It was a big issue for her, and it was an example. And it's just that. You shouldn't go out and create all these other rules around Lashon Hara where it insulates rabbis and Jewish men from their crimes. Okay, this is the end of this Parashat, and I hope it's been informative for you. I hope it's been meaningful for you. And again, I want you so much to have a more joyous Shabbat this weekend than last weekend. I feel better physically, even though my throat, I've been coughing and things like that. Not COVID, just coughing. Every time you get sick, it's not COVID, by the way. But I just want to just wish you the very best. Okay, I want you to wish you the very best. Make a friend, make a relationship. Sing a new Hebrew song you have not sung before. Carded Jews, some of them hit the breaker box in Israel and turn off the power to the freezer box and food and all this. I don't know how they do that. I think they downsize their operations of refrigerated and frozen food. They cook everything they need for Shabbat. The rest of it is put in ice packs and things. If you're curious about that, and I actually have some karate-approved LED lights that are battery chargeable lights, and I put them throughout my house, so I don't need to use lights and things of that nature. Even though I've talked to, I think, some karate rabbis or some experts in karateism and told them, I said, I checked my light bill. I'll say this and I'll end. I'll check my light bill today. I don't owe anything for the next 2 weeks or so because I have solar panels. I'm actually creating more energy than I'm using. So I have a positive balance in my electrical use. It doesn't matter if my air conditioner runs or I have my lights on. I do believe in laws of multiplication. If my light is on before Shabbat, why turn it off if I had needed to increase my quality of Jewish life? If my righteous wife wants to read the Psalms or read a book, if my daughter wants to read a book or do play with toys, something like that, why should they play in darkness? That's just my only point, especially in winter when the days are so short. That's just my point of view, and I can't wait to talk to some scholarly opinions of Karate Jews when I get to Israel, hopefully within 7 to 8 years, okay? Well, anyway, take care. Rabbi Yaar ben-Emmett signing out. Share the knowledge of wealth and love of truth. Everyone's willing to hear it. If they resist it to your truth, your Emmett truth, why don't you live that truth and let your action back your words, and they'll come running to you. Just like in Zechariah 8:23, we have been accused of Christ killers and everything imaginable, okay? But, in the end days, 10 nations will travel to Israel, and they will seek out the Jews for repentance, okay? It's in the good prophet of Zechariah. And no matter how you feel about yourself, you feel rotten and everything else, Elohim cannot possibly forgive me. Well, there's a salvation plan, a redemption plan, complete in Ezekiel chapter 18, verses 20 through 23. Remember, subscribe and personal notify, and so I can grow my listening audience. Send me your feedback. My email address will be posted in the description of this video. Take care. Shalom Aleichem, and God bless you.